How did a small religious group turn into a crisis that still affects Nigeria today? And could it have been stopped before it grew so dangerous? For more than a decade, one name has echoed from the dry plains and forgotten towns of northeast Nigeria. The name is Boko Haram. Boko Haram has become known for causing mass displacement, breaking apart communities, and creating one of the world's largest and most persistent humanitarian crises. Nigeria is a country full of potential, but for years it has been caught in a struggle against a group that rejects the government and everything it stands for. But Boko Haram didn't start with bombs and attack. It didn't start with violence. It began with frustration, with broken promises, with search for meaning in a place where hope was running out. Once upon a time, there was a region where people struggled with poverty and neglect. In the early 2000s, Nigeria was seen as an African power that was rising fast. It had oil wealth and growing cities in the south. But in the north, things were very different. Northern Nigeria, mostly Muslims, was far behind the south in almost everything. Poverty was everywhere, literacy was low, public education didn't work well, jobs were hard to find. On papers, Nigeria had a democracy, but on the ground, many felt nothing had really changed. Political leaders seemed far away and not accountable. Corruption was obvious and people hated it. Young people, especially young men, were frustrated and had little hope for their future. When several northern states in Nigeria decided to adopt Sharia's law in the early 2000s, many people were hopeful. They thought this would be a chance for a fresh start, a way to get rid of corruption and injustice. But that hope quickly faded. The truth was that unemployment remained high, public services stayed poor, and nothing really changed. Millions of children went through the Almajiri system, traditional Quranic schools that focused on religious learning but didn't prepare students for modern life and work. For many young men, this meant they grew up with some education but no jobs. They were faithful to their religion but felt left out of the society. They were looking for dignity, looking for meaning, and looking for answers. Then, one day, a preacher came with offer, and he came and offered answers to them. In the early 2000s, in Maiduguri, a city in Borno State, a young preacher named Muhammad Yusuf started to gain followers. Yusuf was charismatic, confident, and spoke directly about the things that bothered people. He talked about injustice, corruption, and moral decay. He told his listeners that their suffering was not by accident. According to Yusuf, Nigeria's problems were caused by abandoning true Islam and accepting Western system. He believed that democracy, Western law, education, and even some parts of modern life were corrupting the nation. His group was called the Jihadist group, which means people committed to the propagation of the Prophet's teaching and jihad. But people started calling it a simpler name, Boko Haram, which means Western education is forbidden. Too many people outside the group, this sounded extreme, but to the poor and those who felt left behind, it made sense. Yusuf didn't present himself as a terrorist. He saw himself as a reformer, a brave man who was willing to speak the truth when no one else would speak. To his followers, Yusuf wasn't dangerous. He was the only person who seemed to understand their anger. The group built mosques, created tight communities, and started to separate themselves from the rest of the society. They rejected the Nigerian government completely, calling it immoral and illegitimate. At first, there wasn't much violence, but their beliefs were strict, and their rejection of authority eventually led to conflicts. By 2009, things started to get worse. Tensions between Boko Haram and the Nigerian security force grew. The government saw Boko Haram as a threat. They thought of it as a small group causing trouble, but soon they realized it was much more serious. In 2009, after accusations that Boko Haram was stockpiling weapons and breaking local news, the Nigerian government launched a huge crackdown on the group in Maiduguri and several other northern cities. The violence lasted for days. Hundreds of Boko Haram members were killed, their homes and buildings were destroyed. The leadership of the group was crushed. Muhammad Yusuf, the leader of Boko Haram, was captured a few hours later. He was dead. He was killed while in police custody. This moment didn't end Boko Haram, it made them dangerous. For those who survived, Yusuf's death confirmed everything he had said about the Nigerian government. To them, it wasn't just corrupt, it was violent and murderous. A new leader soon emerged, Abubakar Shekau. Shekau was different from Yusuf. While Yusuf was focused on ideology, Shekau was brutal and ruthless. Under his leadership, Boko Haram stopped holding back. They turned to terror. The group went underground, regrouped, and returned stronger, more dangerous, and more violent. Nigeria's fight against Boko Haram had truly begun. From 2010 onwards, Boko Haram's attack became more frequent. The group used bombing, assassinations, and well-coordinated attacks. They targeted police stations, government buildings, church, mosques, and media houses, and even foreign targets. Boko Haram's goal was no longer just to reject the government, they wanted to destroy it completely. Then in 2014 came the moment that shocked the world. Boko Haram kidnapped more than 276 schoolgirls from Chibok. This act sparked global outrage. Social media campaigns like Bring Back Our Girls spread across the world, but in Nigeria, the violence grew stronger. At its peak, Boko Haram controlled large parts of Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa states. They declared their own caliphate and operated openly. The conflict spread through neighboring countries like Cameroon, Chad, and Niger, turning the Lake Chad basin into a war zone. But something unexpected happened. Just as Boko Haram reached its peak, it started to split. By 2016, Boko Haram was under pressure. Military operations were hitting them hard, and there were disagreements within the group. The result, Boko Haram split into two factions. One faction, led by Shekau, continued its brutal tactics, focusing on mass killing and indiscriminate violence. The other faction broke away and aligned itself with the Islamic State, becoming known as ISWAP, or the Islamic State West African Province. This new group focused more on military targets and sought to win local support. They avoided attacking civilians and promised to provide basic services like healthcare and security to help the people in the areas they controlled. Nigeria was no longer fighting just one group. They were facing two different threats. For ordinary people, it didn't matter whether it was Boko Haram or ISWAP. Violence was violence. Millions of people were forced from their homes. Families were torn apart. Communities disappeared. Schools were destroyed or closed. Famine and businesses stopped. Entire ways of life collapsed. Children grew up in refuge camps, with war being the only life they knew. Years of education were lost. The trauma was deep and will continue after generations. In 2021, Abubakar Shekau was reported dead, killed in a fight with ISWAP fighters. This left ISWAP as the dominant group in the region. They were better organized, more strategic, and involved in local economy. By 2025, Boko Haram didn't make the news as much as before, but the violence hasn't stopped. In northern Nigeria, armed bandits have taken over. These criminal gangs carried out kidnapping and raids. Although they are not exactly the same as Boko Haram, they often work together and uses similar weapons. The situation is no longer just about one group. It's now a complex, fragmented web of violence driven by poverty, weak governance, and areas with little control. After years of conflict, Nigeria is tired. The people are exhausted and they feel frustrated. Military operations are still ongoing, but real peace has not come. For peace to last, it needs more than just military action. Nigeria needs to rebuild its communities. The Nigerian army needs to be more equipped with sophisticated weapons. People need to trust their government again. And most importantly, the conditions that allowed Boko Haram to rise in the first place need to be addressed. Without this, the violence will never end. Boko Haram didn't come out of nowhere. It grew in a place where hope was scarce and trust had disappeared. Its legacy is devastating, but the lessons it teaches are clear. Extremism feeds on neglect, violence thrives where there are no opportunities, and peace cannot strive without justice. So, how did a small religious group turn into a massive crisis that still shapes Nigeria in 2025? And most importantly, could it have been stopped? The answer lies not just in the past, but in what Nigeria chooses to do next. Make sure you like this video, share the video, and drop a comment suggesting to what needs to be done for peace to reign in Nigeria.